Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Dragonus Podcastus. School's back in session. My name is Sonali. I'll be your co-host for this evening. And with me is our wonderful host, Mr. Deadphonic.
Hello. If you guys want to support us on our Patreon page, or you want to support us on our Fiverr page, you can do so. Link will be in the description. And also, Denali apparently has been streaming on Twitch lately, so link to her Twitch will also be in the description. Anyway, so since we're back in school mode, I figure we should go back to basics and talk about something that everybody can get behind. Weapons. Wow. This might not be the most appropriate thing to say, but everybody can appreciate the appeal of drawing your first battle axe, or even drawing your first bow. I know I did, even at a young age. So, yeah, we're gonna be looking at famous weapons within the context of my little mini world here. And to start off, I will read you off a quote. Quote, "The first weapon ever picked up by mortal kind for war and killing was the stone. It eventually evolved into various kinds of bladed weapons and went even further with the creation of the tank and artillery platform. But no other weapon is more famous or recognizable than the sword." So most, if not all, of the famous weapons that exist or have been used were made by George Firebeard Ashenkarn. Everybody knows this character at this point. We've done an episode on him. He's awesome. However, there are some exceptions where legendary or mythical weapons in general have been forged in a smithy powered by a dragon flame and blessed with dragon magic. The Runian katanas, for example, are the only weapons that so far have not been forged by George. And most other nations within the world tend to forge their own weapons, and they usually only go to George if they need something specialized, like, say, armor or a very specific weapon. So, starting off with our lovely, our first weapon that we're going to be taking a look at is the Solaris Knight Halberd. This little beauty is the standard weapon used by the Solaris Knights. So it is nearly as tall as the Knights, so they're generally like 8 to 9 feet tall, so it's about their size relatively. Now it does look more ceremonial, but it has the ability to basically chop a person cleanly in half if the Knight is using their full strength, which they often have to hold back for various reasons. Yeah. Oh, and the spear and halberd are here. Hang on, give me 1 second.
That halberd is beautiful.
Yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous. Now this is the Solaris Knight spear. This is more for warfare. This is their war spear.
That is very interesting.
Yeah. Both weapons have anti-shadow and anti-demonic properties, which means basically, you get touched with this thing. If you're a demon, well, you can kiss your fiery rear end goodbye, basically. The spear itself is actually designed specifically for war and is made of some of the strongest material that somebody can get their hands on. And both weapons have a magical security measure where if somebody else tries to use it, basically it electrocutes them non-lethally and knocks them out. Um,
That's
yeah, and so next up is this is more this is a famous weapon in mythology, but I kind of done my own take on it. This is Mjolnir, Thunder's Fury. It was used by the Greek god, or not the Greek god, sorry, the Norse god. I get my mythologies mixed up all the time. Um, it was used by Thor before he was killed by the great wolf Fenrir. Now, if you know your Norse mythology, you know that's not how that happened, but this is a alternate take on that. Now, it rests at the peak of the Horn Mountains. It kind of is the Norse version of Excalibur in a way. And it doesn't have that, like, if they be worthy enchantment that you see in the MCU. Instead, the hammer itself has to deem if you are able to use its full concentrated power. Not just to summon it, but usually someone who calls the hammer does so because they want aid from the beyond. And someone who is pure of heart, but is fair and just can wield its full fury. And not only that, but the lightning itself, that it conjures, gives the wielder this awesome suit of armor, and it can heal. So it does have other uses other than being a true full weapon here.
I like that it's like multi-versatile. Having that utility could really, really come in handy.
Yeah. So next up is Fibelheimer. This is one of the axes, one of the weapons that was used by the Great Mother Valkyria herself. And someone who is only somebody who has proven that they are a child of the Valkyrie can actually wield the axe and summon it and channel its full power. Now, the one thing that makes this different is that it was forged with part of a white and red dragon's heart, so it does have flaming and icing properties. And the funny thing that was a lot of fun making this was that whoever built it basically said, "Oh yeah, it's really light, and you can basically chuck it like a boomerang." So
Really?
yeah, it's one of those weird quirks. And speaking of boomerangs, do you know what you call a boomerang that doesn't come back?
What?
A stick.
Oh, Lord. I'll have to tell that one to my kids later. They'll get a kick out of that.
Yep. Um, yeah, so it can channel frost and flame, and both of which can actually provide armor and heal on top of enhancing the weapon itself. And also, it has most of the weapons here, those runes you see, are actually protection runes, specifically from shadows and demons mostly. Though,
Oh,
though somebody who is sufficiently powerful can override that.
what would be entailed with overwriting that?
Somebody like say like a demon, like a higher demon, or even like say I don't know the big guy himself, Satan might be able to override it. That's just for demons, but for shadows it's a little bit different because their magic is basically it's more subtle and it's more like about undermining you rather than overpowering you like demonic magic tends to do.
Mhm.
So there's that. Next up is a personal favorite from the world of Final Fantasy. Uh, this is the Gunblade. It is a sword that is also a gun.
I
Um,
like that.
yeah, it's I don't know why Final Fantasy VIII did that, but it's still awesome and it's also practical. Though sadly, it hasn't been it hasn't what's the word? It hasn't been fully the gun section part of it hasn't been fully implemented yet.
No, is that just because people, when they are using it habitually and muscle memory takes over and they go into melee fighting, or what's the reason that the gun hasn't been utilized yet?
Well, it's because of how big the blade is. Fitting a rifle barrel or a gun barrel in there. that's long enough to reach the firing chamber.
Mhm.
It reminds me of that the Batman '89 film where Joker pulls out this big ass gun and he shoots down the Batwing. It's like, look, I know it's supposed to be a joke because the Joker is all about like the gag weapons, but
Mhm.
like this is kind of that would be kind of ridiculous. And not to mention, like, how do you drill a hole into a sword blade? Doesn't make sense.
Very carefully.
Very carefully, yeah. And there isn't really anybody who can realistically do that without, damaging the weapon itself.
Yeah. And I feel
Or
like the integrity of the blade itself, if you were to successfully craft the gun part of it, I feel like the blade part of it, the integrity of that would be kind of compromised.
absolutely, and it's either you commit to one part of the weapon idea or you don't, or you shorten the blade. That would be the how I would do it most likely. Now, okay, so next up we have Hemnir, the Red Silence. This this is actually, well, this is supposed to be a katana, but I don't know what happened. Well, it's the only katana of its kind, and it was forged specifically by a red dragon, and it actually cancels out the effects of fire-based magic.
Completely negates it.
Yes, completely negates all fire magic, and it actually can kill red dragons fairly easily too.
Oh, that's interesting. I would have assumed that red dragons would have at least resistance to it, considering it was crafted by one of their own.
That's one of the downsides of forging a weapon that can kill you, I think. I mean, it's not like, oh, I don't know, Excalibur was able to take on, I don't know, like a giant lion and cut its head off easily. Or, that one movie where it had like the sword like shoots out two other swords. It's like, I don't know.
Not OP at all.
Yeah. I try to keep them somewhat grounded. So the next one is Sodomil, Dragon's Bane. This is actually the sword, the personal weapon of Solaris Prime, Jelkum Viking. He actually received this blade when he was a young lieutenant. He rescued an elvish princess from a cult of UNT that were going to sacrifice her. The weapon earned its name because he was tracking down a black dragon that happened to be terrorizing a bunch of villages. Insert the Dragonheart reference here. Um, he tracked it to its lair and basically told it to stop eating people and burning the villages, or it was going to get a decisive boot up its end. The dragon laughed off the threat, so Viking took his blade and cut off one of the dragon's massive toes and sliced off a section of its scales. And he brought them back to Tor and used them to fashion a section of his armor and incorporate them into his shield.
That's like the epitome of badassery.
Yeah.
Like the dragon is currently in the find out era.
Yeah, that was the most fuck around and find out moment of the entire story. And in Dragon Tongue, Sodomil translates roughly to Drake Slayer, but its most common name is Fenderbender.
Oh goodness. I like that.
So next up we have which one is it? It is Lion's Fury. This is let me see if I can find it. Oh yeah, right here. This is the sword of Tangus Toborn. Uh this guy is really cool. He basically it can light itself on fire, and it actually has protection against most, if not all, music based spells, and also it can also negate certain other spells. Hasn't been fully discovered what it can and can't do, but it also has that loyalty thing where if somebody else tries to use it, then it'll basically, well, it'll reject it effectively. All right, so our next one is this, not the Sword of Valkyria used by Valkyria herself, another one of her weapons. This one it's one of the sacred artifacts that is protected by the sisters. It kind of, I wish I didn't have to make this reference, but it functions very similarly to the Sword of Gryffindor, or more precisely Excalibur, for a non Harry Potter example. Um, so one thing that about it is that Valkyria decides who can wield it and when to send it, and usually sending it in a time of need or at the opportune moment. But other times the sword will usually present itself to someone it deems worthy, and usually that person is usually a sister or someone closely associated with the sisters. And this is one of the only weapons that the Horned Sorceress, aka Maleficent herself, fears, because the last time when she crossed over into the mortal world, Valkyria faced her down in her demonic dragon form and chucked that sword into her heart, which not only destroyed her dragon form, but the wound itself never truly healed. And so she has aneurysms anytime she's near that sword or any sister wielding it, and she actively avoids going into her dragon form because of the memory of that. And
Major PTSD.
yes, and after Valkyria ascended and became basically effectively a god, her sword was left behind and it was taken to the temple in the capital of Tor, and it was deemed a holy artifact. And it has been in that temple ever since, and nobody has been deemed worthy to wield it yet. All right, so our next weapon is Tildir the Avenging Light. This is a paladin weapon, 100%.
That looks really cool.
It was wielded by the very first Solaris Prime, and it channels pure sun energy, which pretty much disintegrates most demons and shadows. It is a great sword, but to a Solaris Knight, it's your average long sword. And nobody is stupid enough to try to pick it up or steal it because it's kept inside the Sisters' Temple as well, along with their other holy artifacts, and plus, it's really freaking heavy. And
Really?
and this is the only weapon that gets the honor of being placed inside the temple. And its name was given after its original wielder was killed in battle, and then it never really had a name before that. So, yeah. So next up we have the only ranged weapon on this list. This is the I-103 Mark I stun gun. So it is one of the very few energy-based firearms, and I like to call it the improved ZAT. I assume you're familiar with Stargate?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I don't know if you know this, but for our audience, so the actor who played Daniel Jackson, Michael Shanks, he actively went against carrying a ZAT prop because in his eyes, basically, in his own words, it's a phallic symbol. And I don't think you want to be shooting that at the aliens or carrying something like that and firing at the aliens. But the other problem was they got the whole thing confused. 1 shot stuns, 2 shot kills, 3 shots disintegrates. In the middle of a firefight, you're not going to be able to keep track of that. So the 103 solves that problem by having basically a selector switch. It fires lethal and non-lethal, basically plasma balls that basically incapacitate or full-on kill. The non-lethal is blue, and the lethal is red. It kind of reminds me of the phaser a little bit, like the original 60s phaser a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And in order for the weapon to actually go lethal, the user has to disengage the safety protocol that stops the round from killing. When one
So
move...
that
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, go
I was
ahead.
gonna say that switch between lethal and non-lethal can like happen instantly, seamlessly.
Yes. And One mode is active, the barrel, one of the barrels actually retracts and the other one basically extends. So the active barrel would extend. So the bottom barrel, for example, it would retract when non-lethal is up and vice versa. It has a lock-on feature, which has heat-seeking capability, but only for the non-lethal round. And the non-lethal round itself has a phasing ability, which basically means, say, I don't know, you get into a hostage situation and you need to take down the perp, you could shoot the hostage without worrying. And this is the standard weapon for the Torian City Guard.
Oh,
Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense.
yeah. It is kind of like a taser, but it doesn't have uh the the negatives applied to a taser. So,
It's a spicy taser.
oh yes, throw in a little sriracha and you got a salad.
Mm.
Yeah. So, okay, our next one is, well, it's the King's Blade. So the King's Blade, it's the personal sword of King Fair. It doesn't really have a name, but it was his father's sword, but it was passed down through the generations. It is the only other weapon that wasn't forged by George. Instead, it was gifted to Fair's great-grandfather by a gold dragon as a token of his respect and for letting him reside in the caves below the capital. And
Yeah.
it has a passive leadership aura ability, which basically grants the user the ability to rally and inspire others, as well as enhance the user's own morale and will to fight. So it kind of has the what I like to call the King Theoden effect, or even by extension the Aragorn effect, where basically you can make like this rousing speech and everybody's like, "Yeah, let's kick some ass," kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's for it kind of looks like a dagger, but it is a full size.
It does.
Most of these images are like they're scaled down, but it definitely looks like more like a almost like a rapier.
It does. A thicker rapier, but yeah.
Yeah. Um. So the last two weapons were used by a single character. So the first one, let me see if I can find it. This is Dataya, the Viper's Fury. It is a katana.
Beautiful.
It was the second katana wielded by the Black Viper. It was forged by his own hand at the Pathar Sanctuary using key energy to energize the blade. Um, it it has anti-shadow and anti-demon properties. It has three distinctive moves slash attacks. You've got quintuple slash, which is basically just a 5 strike combo. You have the sheath strike maneuver, which is commonly referred to as Iaijutsu, and it's said that the blade is able to cut someone in half cleanly with no blood. And only a rumor. This is only a rumor though, as the Black Viper has never actually used this technique.
Well,
And then the third move is the Shadow Slash technique, which is a rare technique that was only taught to a very select few people. It basically creates a duplicate of yourself that mimics any slash you perform. And the idea of this is that you would basically use this to trick your enemy into attacking the duplicate while you jump over them and attack their exposed flank. Kind of like a doppelganger jutsu, if you will.
okay.
Yeah. And then finally, we have Niviime, which is the first weapon that was used by the Black Viper. This was actually created by a Charian blacksmith who stole the secrets from a Runian bladesmith and created this for the Black Viper. This was used during the Charian Market Massacre, with the rumored kill being about 75, give or take. The weapon was given to Fern Sensei, Master Hiji, and placed inside his dojo to keep hidden. until the day Fern would have need of it. Um, the rumor going around was that the blade had demonic runes inscribed, which is not true, as you can see from the image
Mhm.
itself. The runes are actually based in Charian shadow magic, um,
That's interesting.
which basically negates clerical powers. So any healing, not gonna happen, basically.
Yeah.
Um, and eventually Fern would give it back, give it to Master Shiji for safekeeping, and he would actually find a cleansing spell that removed the shadow runes and turned it into Wakaizashi with new, more powerful Runian seals on it. So it kind of became his offhand weapon, if you will. So yeah, so that's a very famous weapon. There are more, but I don't have images for them, unfortunately. I don't have stories for them. Actually, well, since I'm here, I might as well talk about um the Zamarin knife. I forgot about this. Sorry. The Zamarin knife. Uh, that's a knife.
That's a noise.
Yeah. Um, this is the standard knife used by the Zamarin on ice fighters. It is forged from the ice in that region, and basically getting stabbed with the sting will turn you into a nice statue.
That's fun.
Yeah, it's not something you want to get hit with. And then
No, I don't think any of these are something you want to get hit with.
no, not at all. And you have also, as a bonus, you have the Zamarin Kukri, which is basically
Oh,
this is more of a specialized weapon. It's not very like common to find them on the Zamarin, so anybody wielding it is basically just gonna be like, what the hell is that supposed to be, kind of thing.
mm-hmm.
Because it is kind of small. Um, yeah, and that's pretty much every famous weapon. There's 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 lots of others. I mean, well, there's also um there's this, which is, I don't know what the hell this is supposed to be. Basically this is the have you ever seen any of the Power Rangers shows?
I was literally just thinking it looked like something from Power
It
Rangers.
does. It is actually supposed it's based off the shark sword from Power Rangers Super Samurai.
Oh my
So
goodness.
it's basically it's a stretchy blade, as I like to
It's
call it.
given.
Yeah. Um and actually there's one more. I don't know if you're familiar with this one. This one actually, it doesn't actually technically belong in my world, but somehow it got there. You may recognize this.
It looks familiar, but I am having major like brain farts.
It's supposed to look like the Master Sword from Legend of Zelda.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing about the Master Sword in this case is that it doesn't have it's not fully energized. It's basically another example of an Excalibur. It was placed in rock in a temple, and basically, well, whoever is crazy enough to try to find it will have to go through a bunch of trials and have to figure out, everything. Every time you get the Master Sword in Legend of Zelda, you have to go through one of those, basically.
Make sure you're still worthy.
Yeah, pretty much. And just don't have an annoying fairy running around, following you around, yelling, "Hey, listen!" Dear God.
It's like having children. You learn to tune it out after a while.
I wish that were the case for me, but I know for you it must be a headache and a half.
Some days, yes, but it's still fun. They've always got an interesting point of view and often can point out things that you haven't seen and a lot that you have.
I wish I had like made like a weapon for like that, like represented each of the four children from Chronicles of Narnia, but I was too preoccupied with other things. And plus, why would you give a young child a dagger? Just
Yeah.
come,
Well,
come on, Santa Claus. You know you're better than that.
I mean, sometimes it's better safe than sorry.
Yeah, good point. Anyway, so that ends our episode. Come back next week and we'll talk about we're gonna talk about some kung fu fighting.
And everybody loves kung fu fighting.
Yeah, including a certain roly-poly-oly bear.
What?
Oh, don't worry. We'll get to that eventually. Don't worry. Anyway, see you guys next week.